Hi, my name is Ashley Tavy, and the topic I chose to research was suicide. The first thing we're going to look at for this PowerPoint is the learning objectives. The first one is to understand suicide and why it is important in public health. The second one being to learn about suicide statistics and disparities. And the third one is to learn and understand treatment and prevention strategies. Many people are affected by suicide or know someone who has committed suicide. Suicide is a very serious issue that is among the leading causes of death in the United States, and it is a major public health concern. The first thing I want to look at is suicide, suicide attempt, and suicide ideation definitions. Suicide is defined as death caused by self-directed, injurious behavior with intent to die as a result of the behavior. The next one is suicide attempt, which is defined as a non-fatal, self-directed, potentially injurious behavior with the intent to die as a result of the behavior, in which a suicide attempt might not end in an injury. And the last one being suicide ideation, which is defined as thinking about, considering, or planning suicide. Now, many people get these definitions mixed up and combine it all together with the definition of suicide attempt, suicide ideation, and suicide. Although they are not alike, and the difference between each definition will help people be able to understand how bad someone is dealing with suicide and how they can help from what ideas they might be having or challenges they might be facing themselves. Moving on to why suicide is important in public health. Looking at suicide in a public health perspective, it is important knowing that it is among one of the leading causes of death. In an article I read, Suicide Prevention, a Public Health Issue, it states why suicide is important in public health. The economic and human costs of suicidal behavior in individuals, families, communities, and society makes suicide a serious problem in public health around the world. And the last one is raising awareness on prevention strategies. This is very important because it helps people know where people are in their journey and how they can help them, and which signs they can look for in someone who they think might be suicidal. The next thing we are going to look at is suicide rates and disparities. The disparities we are going to be looking at are age, gender, race, and education. The very first graph we are going to be looking at is suicide rates by age group. In this graph, you can see difference between gender of male and female age groups. The rates for age fluctuate all over, but for an overview, in women, the high-risk age range to watch is 45 to 64-year-olds. In men, the age range that they are high risk in is 75-plus-year-olds. This is very interesting because not many would believe that 75 plus would have one of the higher rates. In men and women, we can see that men rates are way higher than women's. The next graph we are going to be looking at is suicide rates by race. The data in the figure shows suicide and race, and we can see that it fluctuates quite a bit. The race that was the highest rates would be the American Indians in both the male and the female. In women and men, the next race with the highest rates after American Indians comes white citizens. The next graph we are looking at is age-adjusted suicide rates in the United States. In an article, the National Institute of Mental Health 2019, it also states that the total age-adjusted suicide rate in the United States increased 35.2% from 10.5 to 14.2 per 100,000 from the year 1999 to the year 2018. And the last disparity we're going to look at is suicide rates in education. An article provided by the National Library of Medicine shows that between 2000 and 2014, men and women aged older than 25 years old with at least a college degree exhibit the lowest suicide rates, and those with a high school degree show the highest rates. The next thing we're going to move on to is prevention strategies. Suicide was addressed by providing mental health services to people who were already experiencing or showing types of suicidal thoughts or behavior. While services such as therapy and hospitalization are critical for those who may be thinking about or who have made a suicide attempt. This also shows a bit of the different stages that people might be in, how the beginning stages are more about health services, and then the worst stages are actual hospitalization and therapy. We'll look more into this going into primary prevention strategies, secondary prevention strategies, and tertiary prevention strategies. The first one we are going to look at is primary prevention strategies. In the little triangle to the right, we can see that primary is the bottom one and it's the biggest one also. And this is because it is focusing on basics and the beginnings of what people might be going through. In an article, Suicide Prevention, a Public Health Issue, they talk about primary prevention, bringing up the importance of preventing suicidal behaviors before it ever occurs. Examples of this type of prevention include suicide prevention education, activities and messages promoting suicide prevention. Moving on to secondary and tertiary prevention strategies. We can look at secondary first. This is where the short-term impact and effects of suicide are addressed. Examples of this would be crisis counseling and crisis briefing with people affected by suicide attempt. The last one is tertiary level of prevention, which is where we focus on the long-term responses and plans addressing the after effects. Overall, suicide being among the leading causes of death should open people's eyes to the seriousness of this condition. Looking at suicide from a public health perspective will allow everyone to be able to know when someone around them may be having suicidal thoughts and how to prevent it from the start, which leads to how important suicide is in public health. Without suicide in public health, the rates of suicide are likely to dramatically increase. Thank you.